The Dark Star. The Dark Star 10. Michael shut the car door as he sat down and looked over at Nancy as she slid into the passenger seat and shut the door behind her. So we're just supposed to drive to this GPS location and, what? He asked her as he started the car and looked at the gas gauge. It was 3/4 full. Nancy pushed a tangle of her red hair off of her chin and behind her ear and glanced at the driver's dash. Well, at least we have enough gas. Here, and she pulled her smartphone from her bag and opened it with a glance. What were those GPS coordinates again? She asked, looking at him expectantly. Michael fumbled around in his front pockets and pulled out the now crumpled piece of paper that the computer back inside had printed out. He carefully unfolded it and looked down, squinting. "Damn it, I can't see," he said and clicked the dome light above on. "Okay, so the coordinates are XXX.XXX.XXX and XXX.XXX.XXX. Did you get that?" he asked, looking over at her as she furiously typed the numbers into the screen and the map zoomed into a location near Niagara Falls. The app asked set destination, and she looked over at him. "What I'm trying to understand is what she just told us back there, that cat thing. This is all a simulation. Does that mean that we aren't real? I mean, I grew up in Saratoga Springs, New York. I went to my 10-year reunion. I remember." "What's your earliest memory?" he asked her, and she sat back in the car seat, letting out a sigh. "I remember being really little. And my mom was carrying me to the store in a sling. I can remember how she smells. I remember laying in the grass, I must have been 4 or 5, staring up at this weeping willow tree and watching the little helicopter leaves fall to the ground. And none of it was real. This," she said, hitting the dash of the car, "isn't real? Seems pretty damn real to me. I've got an apartment in New York City, for God's sake," and stared out the window. She squinted her eyes, straining to see into the darkness. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "See what?" Michael replied, just as the bushes exploded and the car was rocked so hard Michael felt the tires slide on the dirt driveway. "What the fuck?" he said just as Nancy screamed. Standing in front of the car was what appeared to be a robotic wolf, with glowing red eyes glaring at them and with metal fangs that looked like they could shred the car like a buzzsaw. In place of fur it had long strands of wire that poked out and looked razor sharp, and at its shoulders were robotic joints that appeared ready to pounce at any moment. The beast stared at them menacingly. "Go! Just go!" Nancy screamed and Michael put the car in drive, the tires sliding against the rough stone driveway. The wolf pounced, its back arching as it leaped through the air straight at them. Michael spun the wheel and the tires suddenly caught, the dirt flying from under the car, and the wolf slammed into the fountain in the center of the circular driveway, the hard stone crumbling like glass. "What the fuck is that thing?" he yelled as he spun the wheel in the opposite direction and the car swung around towards the exit. "Oh God, that gate better be open," he said as they sped down the driveway, the trees zipping past. Nancy looked out the back window of the car. "I hope so, 'cause that thing is still coming," she said, and Michael glanced in the rearview mirror. There, pounding its way down the driveway, was the wolf, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. Michael looked forward and saw the gate was slowly sliding open. "What does the GPS say?" he asked her, and she frantically looked around for her phone. "Fuck, give me a second," she said, and after a moment of digging around pulled it up from the floor and said, "Okay, it says go right in, 10 feet, oh shit," and she glanced up just as the car began sliding sideways. Michael spun the wheel hard to the right and the car began sliding in the rough stone driveway. The tail of the car kicked out, and he thought he was going to lose complete control and crash into the brick pillars of the gate when the wheels caught the hard pavement of the road. In the rearview he saw a blur of gray as the wolf just barely missed the back end of the car, and he slammed the gas as hard as he could, the tires squealing on the county highway. "Nice driving," Nancy said, looking over at him with an impressed stare. "I played a lot of racing games as a kid," he said, and they both laughed, a laughter tinged with nervousness as they sped down the dark highway. The miles went by with a kind of tense silence, Neither of them were sure what to say, so they didn't say anything and let the GPS speak for them. In 400 feet, please turn left, the friendly voice said, and Michael checked his rearview mirror for any sign of the wolf's red eyes in the dark before he began to slow down to make the turn. I think we might have lost that thing, whatever it was, he said, and gently took his foot off of the accelerator. Nancy looked out the passenger window nervously, scanning the shadows between the trees as they went past. Maybe we should try the radio, she said, and reached over and spun the volume knob on the dash. Only static came out from the speakers, and Michael glanced over at the radio and pressed a button. Again, nothing but static. Well, that's weird, he said, and pressed another button. Static again. What's weird? She asked, looking over at him. I've got all of these stations programmed. All of the ones in the area anyway. And it seems like none of them are broadcasting. Which is very, very weird. Let me try, she said, and began turning the tuning knob, scanning through the frequencies. After a few moments, a faint signal came through the speakers, almost buried in background static. Michael, I know it's you, the voice said from the radio, and Michael turned his head sharply to the sound. Is that David? He asked out loud. Are trying to do, the voice continued, you don't understand. She is static sounds, and static sounds what you might think. Please, I am begging you, do not static sounds. Brrrr, and a loud, obnoxious sound came out the speakers, and Michael quickly spun the volume knob to off. So much for the radio then. So, was that your friend David? Nancy asked, looking over at him while he stared at the road ahead. It sounded like him, but I'm not sure what is real anymore. Or even if David, if that's his real name, was ever my friend at all. How much further does it say we have to go? He asked, and she looked down at the phone on her lap. It says we have an hour and 27 minutes to reach our destination. I wonder what is waiting for us when we get there, she said. I don't even want to know at this point, he said, gripping the steering wheel tight. But if that beast back there is any indication at all, I think we are in for a long night. They drove for a little over an hour when the GPS took them off the main highway and onto an old, cracked blacktop two-lane country road before telling them to turn onto an even more decrepit-looking, overgrown dirt road. Michael slowly turned, the tires jostling over the dirt and rocks and the headlights illuminating the darkness of the woods for a moment before the car straightened out and they headed down the dirt road, dust kicking off the tires as they went. Well, I don't think it can get any creepier, Nancy said, looking ahead into the darkness before glancing down at her phone. GPS says the location is 150 feet ahead, not that I can see anything. Me either, he said just a moment before the car was lit up with floodlights. He slammed on the brakes and the car slid to a stop. What the fuck? And he raised his hand to his eyes to try and see out past the glare of the floodlight. He couldn't see a thing. Jesus, what is that light? Nancy asked, covering her eyes. And then quickly as they appeared, the lights were gone. They both blinked their eyes, trying to get the afterglow of the floodlights from their corneas. After a few moments their night vision came back and they looked out the front windshield. There, just in the distance of the headlights, was a dark, concrete building with a flat-faced facade and a set of steps leading up to a steel double door in the middle. There was no parking lot. No other vehicles. Just a concrete building at the end of a dirt road with motion-detecting floodlights surrounding it. Think we should go and knock? Nancy asked and glanced over at Michael with a devilish grin. He shook his head in silence, staring out at the building before them. I think we should go check it out. We can walk from here, hopefully those lights don't go off again, he said carefully, slowly opening the door. Once it was all the way open, he stepped out and looked back in the car. Grab your stuff and don't slam the door. I've had enough of those lights for one night. Have I ever slammed your door? She replied coquettishly and got her things together, put them in her shoulder bag and slowly made her way out of the car, carefully closing it behind her and winking over at Michael, who stared incredulously. We almost got torn to shreds by a robotic wolf monster, and now you've got jokes, he said, shaking his head and walking towards the building ahead of them. It's the only way I know how to stay sane when I'm nervous. That and biting my nails, but I gave that up years ago, so, jokes, she said, shrugged and followed along behind him. When they got to the top of the steps, they could see a small sleek black terminal next to the door that had a blinking red light at the top. When they got close enough, Michael could see there was a display on the screen and it was shaped like a human hand. He pressed his hand up to the glass and a small laser scanned his handprint before the screen blinked red 3 times and went dark. I guess my hand doesn't work. What the hell am I supposed to do? Want to try yours? He said and looked over at Nancy. I doubt I'll have any better luck. What about that device Dr. Campbell gave you? She said. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out the device he'd gotten and opened its faded leather case. As soon as it was open, the screen came to life and he saw there was a menu on the display that said "Welcome to the Portable Universal Hacking Device by Automated Systems," and below there was a list of options: disable shock drones, reset platforms, transmit signal, keypad scanner, handprint descrambler, and a few others. He tapped the handprint descrambler and said, "One moment please. Scanning for devices. Device found. Cache location found. Please match the set," the screen said, and was then filled with 3 rows of tiny pictures of handprints. He could barely see the details of any of them. He squinted his eyes. It was no good. "Here, let me try," Nancy said and took the device from his hands and held it up to her face. "I spent a lot of years reading barely legible copy from microfilm doing research," she said as her eyes scanned the rows of prints looking for matching details. After a moment she tapped the screen twice and handed it back to him. "I think that should do it." The twin steel doors slid open effortlessly with a whoosh and they both looked past the doorway into the room within. Michael closed the fold on the hacking device's cover and slid it back into his back pocket as Nancy nervously looked towards the room within. "Well, I guess we didn't come all this way for nothing," she said, looking at him, and together they stepped through the doorway and into the dimly lit room within. They looked around the room, trying to get an idea of what was inside, peering into the darkness, when the floor lights went out and in the center of the room a curved stainless steel pillar rose from the floor awash in a glow of light. At its full height it stood 10 feet tall, and when it stopped its climb from the floor with a soft hydraulic gasp, the center split open like a clamshell, revealing an elevator lift and a panel on the wall with only one arrow pointing straight down. "Well, I guess this is it then," Michael said, glancing over at Nancy, and she nodded her head in agreement. They followed the glowing lights into the elevator and Michael leaned forward, pushing the down button with his index finger. The clamshell slowly closed around them as the doors came back together with a click and the interior of the elevator lit up a dark crimson red. "We have another visitor," a darkly robotic voice called out, echoing in each direction from the metal walls of the elevator. "Stay a while, stay forever." "Mwahaha," the voice laughed in its warbled robotic way as the elevator began descending. After a few breathless moments the doors opened and in the room in front of them was a 1950s-style living room with a Buddy Holly record playing in the background. Rolling on wheels back and forth was a robot that looked like Rosie the Robot from the Jetsons cartoon show he used to watch as a kid, wearing an apron and a bonnet. Suddenly the robot stopped moving and turned its head to look right at both of them. "Destroy them, my robots," the demonic voice said, and Rosie's eyes turned a glowing red and her robotic wheels began rolling straight at them.